It was a bright, sunny Saturday in Oakwood Heights. The kind of day where everything feels happy and calm. Kids were riding their bikes up and down the street, laughing and shouting. Grown UPS were outside too, pushing lawnmowers or watering flowers. The air smelled like fresh grass and summer. I, Jake Miller, thought it was the perfect day to do something nice for my new house. I had just moved to this neighborhood a few weeks ago, and I wanted it to feel like home. So, I grabbed a hammer, some nails, and a little wooden sign I made. The sign said, "The Millers, happy to be here," in big, friendly letters. I walked out to my front yard, picked a tall tree near the sidewalk, and nailed the sign right up there. It looked good, I thought. Simple, but nice. I smiled, feeling proud. I figured everyone would like it. Oh boy, was I wrong about that? See, I'm just a regular guy. I'm not super tall or super loud. I don't drive a fancy car or wear shiny clothes. I just wanted to fit in and make friends in Oakwood Heights. It's a pretty little place with neat houses, green lawns, and white fences. Kids play outside, and dogs bark at squirrels. It seemed like the kind of spot where people wave hello and share cookies. That's what I hoped for when I moved here. But not everyone was happy to see me or my sign. Someone was watching me that day. Someone with sharp eyes and a big frown. Her name was Karen Wilcox. Around here, people called her the HOA Queen Bee. HOA means Homeowners Association. It's a group that makes rules for the neighborhood, like what color your house can be or how tall your grass can grow. Karen was the boss of it all. She loved rules. She loved telling people what to do. And she really didn't love my welcome sign. Karen lived 2 houses down from me. Her place was perfect, too perfect, if you ask me. Her grass was always cut just right, like she measured it with a ruler. Her flowers stood in straight rows, all red and white, no mess allowed. She had a big sign on her lawn that said, HOA President Karen Wilcox. She walked around like she owned the whole street, not just her house. People said she'd been in charge of the HOA for years. If your mailbox was the wrong shade of blue or your trash can stayed out too long, Karen would know. And she'd make sure you knew she knew. She was nosy, like, super nosy. She'd peek out her window if you sneezed too loud. And she was loud herself. If she didn't like something, everyone heard about it. She'd yell, wave her arms, and march right over to tell you off. That's who Karen was. And my little sign? It was about to make her madder than a bee stuck in a jar. I didn't know all this when I put up my sign that Saturday. I was just happy to be outside, feeling the sun on my face. I stepped back to look at my work. The sign swung a little in the breeze, and I thought, this is great. It says I'm here, and I'm friendly. I pictured neighbors walking by, smiling at it. Maybe they'd stop and say hi. Maybe they'd think, that Jake guy seems nice. That's all I wanted. But Karen had other ideas. She didn't see a friendly sign. She saw trouble. She saw something that didn't fit her perfect little world. And she wasn't going to let it slide. Not for 1 second. She watched me from her porch, her arms crossed, her eyes squinting like she was mad at the whole universe. I didn't notice her at first. I was too busy wiping dirt off my hands and feeling good. But she was there, planning her next move. She didn't like me, and she hated my sign. Little did she know, I wasn't just some new guy with a hammer. I had a secret. A big one. And it was going to turn her world upside down. Let me tell you a bit more about that day. The sun was high, and the sky was blue, no clouds anywhere. Birds chirped in the trees, and a little girl zoomed by on a pink scooter. I waved at her, and she waved back. It felt like a movie, you know? One of those happy ones where everyone gets along. I grabbed a cold drink from my fridge and sat on my front steps, looking at my sign. It wasn't fancy. I'd made it myself with some wood and paint from the store. The letters were a little wobbly, but I liked it that way. It felt real, not fake or store-bought. I sipped my drink and thought about how lucky I was to live here. New house, new start. That's what I kept telling myself. But then I heard it, a huff. A loud, annoyed huff, like someone was choking on air. I looked up, and there was Karen. She'd walked closer, standing on the edge of my yard. She had her hands on her hips, her lips pressed tight. She stared at my sign like it was a monster. I waved at her, trying to be nice. "Hey, neighbor," I said. She didn't wave back. She just glared harder. "Hi," she said, but it wasn't a friendly hi. It was a mean hi, the kind that says, "I don't like you." Then she pointed at my sign. "What's that?" she asked, like I'd hung up a pile of trash. I stood up, brushing off my jeans. "Oh, just a welcome sign," I said. "I thought it'd be fun." She snorted. Snorted. Like a pig in mud. "Fun," she said. "That's not fun. That's ugly. And it's against the rules." I blinked. "Rules? What rules?" I didn't know about any rules. I'd just moved in. I didn't see anything about signs," I said. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd fall out. "Well, it's in the HOA handbook," she snapped. "No signs unless I say so. And I don't say so." Then she turned and marched off, her shoes clicking on the pavement. I stood there, confused. Handbook? What handbook? Nobody gave me one. That's when I started to figure out Karen was going to be a problem. She wasn't just nosy or loud. She was bossy, super bossy. And she didn't like me one bit. But here's the thing, I wasn't scared of her. Not even a little. See, I had something she didn't know about. A secret that made me smile inside, even when she was huffing and puffing. I wasn't just Jake Miller, the new guy with a goofy sign. I was more than that. A lot more. And soon, Karen was going to find out exactly who she was messing with. But that's a story for later. For now, I just watched her stomp away, my sign still hanging on the tree. The day was still sunny, the kids were still riding bikes, and I wasn't worried. Not yet. Monday came fast after that sunny Saturday. The weekend was over, and the neighborhood got quiet again. Kids went to school, and grown UPS went to work. I was outside, sipping my morning juice, when I saw her, Karen Wilcox. She came stomping across my lawn like it was her own front yard. Her shoes squished into the grass, and her face was all scrunched up, like she'd just smelled something bad. She stopped right in front of my welcome sign, the one that said, "The Millers, happy to be here," and pointed at it with a long, bony finger. "That sign's an eyesore," she barked. Her voice was loud and sharp, like a dog yapping at a mailman. She acted like my little sign had insulted her, like it had called her a mean name or something. "It's against HOA rules, and I'm reporting you," she said, her eyes flashing with anger. I stood there, holding my juice, trying not to laugh. She looked so mad over a piece of wood. I wanted to be nice, so I flashed her a big smile. "It's just a welcome sign, Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm. "No harm done." I thought maybe she'd chill out if I stayed friendly. But oh no, Karen wasn't having it. Not even a little bit. Her face got even redder, like a tomato about to pop. She reached into her pocket and yanked out her phone super fast, like she was pulling a sword in a fight. She punched some numbers in, then held the phone to her ear. "Yes, hello, HOA hotline," she said, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "This is Karen Wilcox, president. We've got a rule breaker at 12 Oakwood Lane. Ugly sign, totally illegal." She smirked at me while she talked, her lips curling up like she'd just won a big prize. I could hear a tiny voice on the other end of the phone, but I couldn't tell what it said. Karen didn't care. She was too busy glaring at me. "You'll regret moving here," she hissed, her voice low and mean, like a snake sneaking through the grass. Then she spun around and stormed off, her arms swinging hard. Her shoes clicked on the sidewalk as she marched back to her perfect house. I watched her go, standing there with my juice still in my hand. I wasn't mad. I wasn't scared. I just shrugged my shoulders, like, okay, whatever. See, Karen thought she could boss me around. She thought I was just some new guy who didn't know anything. She thought she was the queen of Oakwood Heights, and I was just a silly kid who'd learned to obey her rules. But she was wrong. I wasn't scared of her huffing and puffing. I didn't care about her phone call or her smirky face. Because I wasn't just some random newbie. I'd been watching her too. And I knew something she didn't. Something big. Something that made me smile inside, even when she was being so mean. Let me tell you how it felt that morning. The air was cool, and the sun was just starting to warm things up. My lawn still looked nice, even with Karen's shoe marks in it. My sign was still hanging on the tree, swinging a little in the breeze. I liked it there. It made me happy. But Karen? She hated it. She hated anything that wasn't her idea. After she left, I sat on my porch steps and thought about what happened. She'd called my sign an eyesore. That means she thought it was ugly, like a pile of trash or a broken toy. I didn't get it. It was just wood and paint. It wasn't hurting anybody. But to Karen, it was like a big, loud alarm saying, Jake doesn't follow my rules. And she couldn't stand that. She wanted everything perfect her way, all the time. I started to notice little things about her after that. Like how she'd peek out her window every time I went outside. I'd grab my mail, and there she was, her nose pressed against the glass. I'd water my plants, and her curtains would twitch. She was always watching, always waiting for me to mess up. And she kept talking about those HOA rules. It's in the handbook, she'd said. But I still didn't have a handbook. Nobody gave me one when I moved in. I asked my next-door neighbor, Mr. Tom, about it later that day. He's an old guy with a big beard and a friendly laugh. Oh, Karen's always going on about that handbook, he said, shaking his head. She hands it out when she feels like it. Mostly to people she likes. I frowned. She doesn't like me? I asked. Mr. Tom chuckled. She doesn't like anybody who doesn't kiss her feet, he said. That made me laugh. Kiss her feet? No way. But Karen wasn't laughing. She was serious. Dead serious. She wanted my sign gone, and she wanted me to feel small. She thought her phone call to the HOA hotline would scare me. She thought I'd run out there, yank the sign down, and say, sorry, Karen. You're right. But I didn't. I left it up. I wasn't going to let her win that easy. See, I wasn't just some guy who moved in with a hammer and a smile. I had a trick up my sleeve. A secret she didn't see coming. I'd been watching her longer than she'd been watching me. Every time she yelled at someone, I noticed. Every time she bossed a neighbor around, I remembered. I was quiet about it, but I was paying attention. And I knew something about her, something she didn't want anyone to know. It was big. Really big. Bigger than her dumb rules or her loud voice. That Monday, after she stomped off, I went back inside my house. I wasn't worried. I wasn't shaking or crying. I was calm. I poured more juice and sat by my window, looking out at my sign. It was still there, still saying, "The Millers, happy to be here." Karen could huff and puff all she wanted. She could call her hotline and make her threats. But I wasn't going anywhere. And neither was my sign. She thought she was the boss of me, but she didn't know the truth. She didn't know who I really was. And that made me feel strong, even when she was being so mean. The tension was building, like a storm getting ready to break. Karen was mad, and I was ready. Something was coming, something she'd never expect. But for now, I just sat there, sipping my juice, waiting to see what she'd do next. Days went by after that Monday when Karen stomped across my lawn. The sun kept shining, the kids kept playing, but Karen didn't let up. Not even a little. Every time she walked by my house, she'd stop and glare at my welcome sign, the one that said, "The Millers, happy to be here." Her eyes would squint, and her mouth would twist into a frown. She'd mutter stuff under her breath, loud enough for me to hear if I was outside. "Standards," she'd grumble. "This neighborhood has standards." Or she'd say, "Rule breakers like you ruin everything." I'd just sit on my porch, sipping my juice, pretending I didn't notice. But I did. I noticed everything. She was like a bee buzzing around, mad and ready to sting. And she wasn't going to stop until my sign was gone. Then the letters started coming. One morning, I opened my mailbox, and there it was, a white envelope with HOA written on it in big, black letters. I pulled it out, ripped it open, and read it. "Dear Mr. Miller," it said. "Your sign at 12 Oakwood Lane is against HOA rules. Take it down by Friday, or pay a $50 fine." $50? For a little piece of wood? I laughed a little, shaking my head. The letter was signed, Karen Wilcox, HOA President. Of course it was. The next day, another letter came. Same thing, take the sign down, or pay a fine. By the end of the week, I had 4 letters, all stuffed in my mailbox like angry little notes from a teacher. Karen wasn't playing around. She wanted that sign gone, and she wanted me to know she was serious. The neighbors started talking too. I'd see them outside, watering their flowers or walking their dogs, and they'd whisper to each other. Sometimes they'd look at me, then look away real fast. One day, Mrs. Linda from across the street came over. She's a nice lady with gray hair and glasses. She brought me a plate of cookies and said, "Jake, you better watch out for Karen. She always gets her way." I took a cookie and nodded. "Thanks for the heads up," I said, smiling. Another time, Mr. Tom, the old guy with the beard, stopped by. "Karen's like a bulldog," he told me. "Once she bites onto something, she doesn't let go. That sign of yours? She'll fight till it's down." I just nodded again, acting polite. "Good to know," I said. They thought I was in big trouble. They thought Karen was too strong, too mean, too bossy for me to handle. But I didn't say much. I kept quiet. I didn't tell them what I was up to. Because I wasn't just sitting around, waiting for Karen to win. See, while Karen was glaring and sending letters, I was busy. I wasn't scared of her. I wasn't going to rip my sign down and hide. Nope. I was digging. Digging for stuff she didn't want me to find. I started asking questions around the neighborhood. I'd chat with people, the old-timers, mostly. Folks who'd lived here a long time, way before I showed up. Like Mr. Tom. One day, I brought him a lemonade and sat on his porch. "How long has Karen been in charge of the HOA?" I asked, real casual. He scratched his beard and thought about it. "Oh, 5 years, maybe 6, he said. She took over after old Mrs. Penny moved away." I nodded. "She ever do anything funny with the HOA stuff?" I asked. He squinted at me. "Funny how?" he said. I shrugged. "I dunno. Just wondering." He didn't say much more, but I could tell he was thinking. I kept digging after that. I went to the library downtown and looked at some papers' records about the neighborhood. They were boring, with lots of tiny words, but I found some good stuff. HOA records. Money stuff. I wrote things down in a little notebook I kept in my pocket. Then I talked to more people. Like Mrs. Betty, who lives at the end of the street. She's super old, with white hair and a cane, but her eyes are sharp. Karen's always collecting dues, she told me one day, sipping tea on her porch. "Every year, we pay her to keep the neighborhood nice. But where's the money go?" I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" I asked. She shrugged. "Playground's still broken. Street lights flicker. Doesn't add up." That got me thinking. Dues are money everybody pays to the HOA. If Karen was taking it, where was it going? I didn't say anything to Mrs. Betty, but I smiled. "Interesting," I said. She nodded, like she knew I was onto something. Bit by bit, I found dirt on Karen. Juicy dirt. The kind of stuff that makes your eyes go wide and your mouth say, "Whoa." I didn't tell anybody yet, not Mr. Tom, not Mrs. Linda, not anybody. I kept it secret, locked up in my head. But I knew things now. Things Karen didn't want me to know. Like how the HOA money wasn't all going where it was supposed to. Like how she'd been sneaky for a long time. She thought she was so smart, sending me letters and glaring at my sign. She thought she was in charge, the big boss of Oakwood Heights. But her clock was ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Every day, I learned a little more. Every day, I got closer to something big. Something that could flip this whole game upside down. Karen didn't know any of this. She kept walking by, muttering about standards and rule breakers. She kept stuffing my mailbox with her silly letters. The neighbors kept whispering, thinking I was toast. But I wasn't worried. I'd nod at them, wave hello, and go back to my digging. I'd sit on my porch at night, looking at my sign, and smile. It was still there, still swinging on the tree. Karen hated it, but it wasn't going anywhere. And neither was I. She thought she was winning, but she didn't see what was coming. She didn't know I was watching her, just like she watched me. She didn't know I had dirt, juicy, messy dirt that could change everything. The tension was growing, like a balloon getting too full of air. Sooner or later, it was going to pop. And when it did, Karen wouldn't be smirking anymore. Friday morning came, and I woke up to a big surprise. Loud sirens screamed outside my window, wee-oh-oh, wee-oh-oh. I rubbed my eyes and jumped out of bed, still in my pajamas. I peeked through the curtains, and wow, 2 police cars were rolling into our cul-de-sac. That's the little circle street where my house is. Their red and blue lights flashed bright, lighting up the whole neighborhood. I grabbed a shirt, pulled it on fast, and stepped outside to see what was going on. My heart was beating a little quick because sirens mean something big, right? I stood on my porch, curious, trying to figure it out. Then I saw her, Karen Wilcox. She was on her porch, 2 houses down, waving her arms like a wild woman. Her hair was messy, and her voice was loud, cutting through the morning air. "Officers," she yelled, pointing right at my welcome sign, the one that said, "The Millers, happy to be here." She was jumping up and down, acting like my sign was the worst thing ever. "Arrest him," she shouted, her finger shaking as she pointed at me. "That ugly thing's a public nuisance," I called. 911. A public nuisance. That's when something annoys everybody, like a loud noise or a stinky smell. She thought my sign was so bad she called the police. I stood there, my mouth open a little, not sure if I should laugh or hide. Karen looked so sure of herself, like she'd finally won. She'd been mad about my sign all week, glaring at it, sending me letters, telling me to take it down. Now she'd called the cops, and she was smiling like she'd caught me doing something awful. But here's where it gets good. The 2 police officers didn't even look at me. Not for 1 second. They didn't walk toward my house or my sign. Nope. They turned their boots and marched straight toward her. Karen's porch was their target, not mine. I watched, my eyes getting big, as they climbed her steps. One cop was tall with a serious face. The other was shorter, holding something shiny in his hand. Karen stopped waving her arms. Her smile disappeared fast, like someone flipped a switch. What are you doing?" she stammered, stepping back a little. Her voice wasn't loud anymore. It was shaky, like she was confused. The tall cop stopped right in front of her and spoke, loud and clear so everyone could hear. "Karen Wilcox," he said, "you're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement. We've been investigating you for months." Whoa. My jaw dropped. Arrest. Fraud. Embezzlement. Those are big words, but they're simple when you break them down. Fraud means lying to trick people. Embezzlement means stealing money you're supposed to take care of. The cop was saying Karen had been sneaky, really sneaky. Her face went white, like all the color drained out of it. She looked like a ghost standing there. The shorter cop pulled out handcuffs, those metal bracelets they put on bad guys, and clicked them open. "Wait, no." Karen squeaked, holding up her hands. "This is a mistake. I didn't do anything. It's him you want." She pointed at me again, but the cops didn't care. The tall one grabbed her arm, gentle but firm, and turned her around. The handcuffs went click-click on her wrists. She was caught, and she didn't even see it coming. Now, here's the big reveal, the part that makes the story wild. I wasn't just Jake Miller, the new guy with a goofy sign. Nope. I was Jake Miller, private investigator. That's a fancy way of saying I'm a secret detective. I get paid to find out stuff people don't want found. And guess what? I'd been hired to catch Karen. Yep, that's right. Before I even moved to Oakwood Heights, some people were suspicious about her. They thought she was stealing HOA money, the cash everybody pays to keep the neighborhood nice. Playgrounds, streetlights, stuff like that. But the playground was broken, and the lights flickered. Where was the money going? They called me to find out. So I moved in, acting like a regular guy, watching her every move. That sign? The one she hated so much. It was just bait. Bait is something you use to trick someone, like a worm on a fishing hook. I put it up to keep her busy. I knew she'd fuss about it, yell about rules, and send me letters. And while she was busy being mad at my sign, I was digging for the truth. I talked to neighbors, checked records, and found proof she was taking the money. Thousands of dollars. She'd been sneaking it into her own bank account for years, thinking nobody would notice. But I noticed. And I told the cops. They'd been watching her too, waiting for the right moment. That Friday morning, when she called 911 about my sign, they were already on their way to get her. Karen didn't know any of this. She thought I was just some dumb new guy she could boss around. She thought my sign was her big problem. But it wasn't. She was the problem, and I was the one who caught her. As the cops put her in the police car, she kept yelling, "This is wrong. You've got the wrong person." But they didn't. They had papers, proof, everything they needed. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching it all. My sign was still up, swinging on the tree. Karen's perfect little world was falling apart, and I'd helped make it happen. It felt good, like solving a puzzle or winning a game. She'd been so mean, so loud, so sure she was in charge. But now she was the one in trouble, and I was the one smiling. The big reveal was out, and Karen's game was over. Karen's jaw dropped so low it almost hit the ground when the cops put the handcuffs on her. She looked shocked, like she couldn't believe it was happening. "This is a mistake," she screeched, her voice high and squeaky, like a bird in a panic. She twisted her head around, looking at the neighbors who were peeking out their windows or standing on their lawns. "You've got the wrong person," she yelled. But nobody was buying it. Not the cops, not the neighbors, not anybody. See, Karen had been sneaky for years. She'd been skimming dues, taking little bits of money that didn't belong to her. Dues are the cash everyone in the neighborhood pays to the HOA to fix things like playgrounds and streetlights. But Karen wasn't using it for that. Nope. She was tucking thousands of dollars into her own bank account, like a squirrel hiding nuts. She thought nobody would find out. But I did. And I told the cops. They had all the proof, papers, bank stuff, everything, thanks to my tip-off. The cops didn't waste time. They grabbed her arms and hauled her off her porch. She kept yelling, kicking her feet a little, but it didn't matter. They put her in the back of the police car, and the door shut with a loud thunk. As they drove away, something cool happened. Folks started clapping. Yep, the neighbors stepped outside and cheered, like they were watching a big win at a game. Mr. Tom, the old guy with the beard, walked over to me. He was grinning big. "Knew there was something off about her," he said, shaking my hand hard. "Good job, Jake." I just smiled and nodded. "Thanks," I said. Mrs. Linda from across the street waved at me, holding her plate of cookies. Even the little girl with the pink scooter stopped riding and clapped her hands. Everybody was happy Karen was gone. And me? I looked at my sign, "The Millers, happy to be here," still hanging on the tree. I grinned and left it right where it was. No way was I taking it down now. That night, the HOA board had a meeting. The board is the group of people who help run the neighborhood rules. With Karen gone, they got together fast. Guess what? They voted to ditch all her silly rules. No more fussing about signs or grass height or mailbox colors. They were tired of her bossy ways, and they wanted things to be fun again. Oakwood Heights felt different already, like a big weight was gone. People smiled more, waved more, and stopped whispering about Karen. She wasn't the queen bee anymore. Her reign was over, and everybody was free at last. I sat on my porch that night, sipping juice, feeling proud. Justice was served, and it felt awesome, like the good guys won in a superhero movie. My sign stayed up, and Karen? She was out of luck. So there you have it, friends. Karen thought she could boss me around, push me down, and make me follow her silly rules. She thought she was the big boss, the queen of everything. But she didn't know who she was messing with. I wasn't just some quiet new guy. I had a plan, a secret, and I used it to stop her. Sometimes, the person you think is small and quiet, the one who doesn't yell or fight, is the one holding all the cards. They're smart, they watch, and they wait. And the ones who act all high and mighty, like they're better than everybody, they're usually the first to fall. Karen learned that the hard way. She thought she'd win, but she tripped over her own sneaky tricks. What about you? Ever met a Karen who got what was coming to her? Maybe a bossy kid at school, a mean neighbor, or someone who thought they could push people around. I bet you've got a story. Drop it in the comments below, I want to hear all about it. Stories like this show us something cool: you don't have to be loud or big to be strong. You can be quiet, kind, and still stand up for what's right. That's what I did with my sign and my secret. And look what happened: Karen's gone, the neighborhood's happy, and I'm still here, smiling. So keep being you, keep being brave, even if nobody sees it at first. The good guys can win, and the bossy ones, they don't always get the last word. Let's keep this story rolling. Tell me your tales, and let's cheer each other on.